And while I wouldn't recommend necessarily going out and buying one, if you have one already, it's gonna last you fine for the rest of the year and probably next year as well, depending on what you do with your phone. So this brings up an interesting dilemma for Apple. They could A, leave it on iOS 11, which despite some issues isn't too bad, or B, update it to iOS 12. The problem with updating the 5S to iOS 12 is the possibility of major slowdown, like we saw with the 4S. An extra year of support is great, but if it comes at the cost of making the phone unusable, then it isn't worth it. Part of the reason the iPhone 5, in my opinion, is the best iPhone to date is because of how well it ran throughout its life cycle. It's still quite fast, even on iOS 10. I want this to happen with the 5S, and so if that means not getting iOS 12, then that's worth it. Now, there are some more factors to consider. The 5S and iPhone 6 are very close to the same when it comes to processing power, and so it would make sense if the 6 gets the update, which it will, that the 5S does as well. However, because the iPhone 6 was released a year later, in theory, it needs to be supported a year more than the 5S. So what am I saying here? Well, like the 5S, the 6 isn't perfect on iOS 11. It's chugging along, but it's starting to feel slow. By updating it to iOS 12, it's probably going to be even slower. And if the 5S updates as well, then that means it needs to get iOS 13, as in the 6 needs to update to iOS 13. So even if the 5S performs okay on iOS 12, it could indirectly result in the iPhone 6 being killed because it wouldn't be able to run iOS 13 properly, but Apple would have no choice but to update it anyway. So if I was working at Apple, what would I do? Well, it's rumored that iOS 12 is going to be more of a performance and security update. If that's the case, I would run extensive testing on the iPhone 5S to see if it suffers performance-wise. If it doesn't, then I would allow it to update, giving everyone an extra year even if it breaks basic patterns. Again, iOS 11 isn't terrible anymore, but it's still not great, and it'd be nice if we could end the 5S on a sweeter note. However, if there is a noticeable performance drop, then I would leave the 5S with iOS 11. I think that in this way, we could allow it to die off naturally. What do I mean by die off naturally? Well, slowly people will move on to better phones. No one's going to be too mad if the 5S doesn't get iOS 12. Yeah, there'll be people here and there saying, what, I really wanted the next version, but the thing about that is that it's not coming out of nowhere if Apple doesn't update it. They've established these patterns, and so they aren't really hurting anybody. Yes, you might not like it if you don't get iOS 12, but at the same time, you can't really fault Apple for not giving it to you. I mean, the phone was supported for 5 years. That's pretty crazy. And of course, again, they could support it with iOS 12. But what I'm saying here is that after a phone becomes unsupported, people will slowly move on to better phones. So for example, with the iPhone 5, you still have people on it because it's supported up to iOS 10, but next year and the year after, as more and more apps move to newer versions of iOS, less and less people will be on the iPhone 5 and 5C. However, with the iPhone 4S situation, what happened is you had a lot of people jump from it very quickly, even though it got iOS 9, because of how slow it became. It was pretty brutal. If you've ever used one, it's hard. It's not really a fun time. On iOS 8, it was, already slow, and it was okay, but definitely slower than it probably could have been. And with iOS 9, it was just brutal. What I'm saying here is that it's much better to slowly have a phone die than to kill it and have people be forced to move on, like with what happened with the 4S. In conclusion, although it's kind of feeling like I'm repeating myself here, I don't want Apple to kill the iPhone 5S. Will they? I don't know. I really hope not. And if they just blindly update it to iOS 12, it could very well happen. So I guess I'm saying that if Apple doesn't decide to give it the update, then that'll be certainly fine with me, and it'll hopefully more or less continue the trend they started with the iPhone 5 and 5C, with phones ending on good updates. But I do want to hear what you guys think. Do you think the 5S should get the iOS 12 update? And if it does, do you think that it will kill it performance-wise? Obviously, we aren't going to know until we see it, but do you think that it's worth that risk to get iOS 12? I'm curious to see what you all say here. Sorry for the kind of shorter video, but I had a couple people ask me to do a video on how Apple killed the 5S, and while I would say that they've killed the 5S, or at least have killed it yet, I liked the general idea of the question. I hope you found this video interesting, and if so, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, because that'd be pretty cool of you. Links down below. And with that all being said, I'm Josh from 91Tech, and I will see you all next time.
Hi guys, it's Jamie. I am here with Kiehl's. It's time to take our makeup off. I'm going to use my Midnight Recovery Cleansing Oil. going to show you guys how good it is at getting stubborn eye makeup off. We're just going to gently massage, and when you're ready, pull it. Oh, so fresh. Look. Time to get the rest of this makeup off. And the way that I actually really like using this oil is to just pump it in my hand. 1, 2, 3. So we're all oily. Wash it off. Gone in 20 seconds. Next thing we're going to go in with is the Midnight Recovery Concentrate. Pat that into my skin. Takes 2 seconds. Next is the Ginger Leaf and Hibiscus Firming Mask. Makes your skin feel nice and bouncy. Through the night, it absorbs. In the morning, you just wash it off. I hope you guys enjoyed.
Released already 9 years ago, the iPhone 3GS brought video recording capabilities for the first time, and it also doubled the RAM of the previous generation. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be talking about the iPhone 3GS. It was an immediate success back in 2009, but how does the 3GS hold up in 2018? Before we get started here, I'll briefly mention that I do have a Twitter and Instagram, and so if you want to go follow me over there, that'd be pretty cool of you. But enough of that, let's get started. The iPhone 3GS shipped with iOS 3, and it is upgradable to iOS 6, which is what you'll find on the vast majority of 3GSs today. Interestingly, it's extremely easy to downgrade to iOS 4.1, and if you have an early model, you can even downgrade further. However, I don't have an early model, and they are quite rare, so don't expect to be able to go past 4.1. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but for now, let's talk about the design of the iPhone 3GS. It has a plastic back and a stainless steel frame, giving the phone a very premium, although odd feeling. It's uncommon now for Apple to use plastic materials for their phones, but back then it was the norm. The plastic feels really nice, in my opinion, and the phone is very grippy, which is always good. Which is probably the most common place to find abrasions. The phone is curved, which sets it apart from all of Apple's newer phones, and it makes it very comfortable to hold. Some considerable texture, and the phone is fairly thick, but considering age, I'm willing to give it a lot of passes. Overall, I like the 3GS. It's perfect, but it does the job, and although it hasn't hung up the best over the years, it has a real neat look to it because it's so different than any other iPhone we see today. Moving to the display, the 3GS really starts to feel dated. It's sized at 3.5 inches and has an awful resolution of 320 by 480 and pixel density of 165 pixels per inch. You can see the pixels, and that's the issue here. The screen just does not look good. Apple's Retina display wasn't introduced until the next year with the iPhone 4, and this is very obvious while using this device. Things displayed are not crisp. Everything just looks a little bit blurry, and for some reason the display has a crazy blue tint when you tilt it away from you. Again, this was in 2009, so we do need to take that into account. No other phones had significantly better displays than this at the time, and if anything, it just makes me appreciate the iPhone 4's display even more. The phone has a 1220 milliamp hour battery, which sounds pretty bad, but remember the phone doesn't have a whole lot to power. However, because of the age of the phone, it's unlikely you'll find one with a decent battery anymore, but if you did, it would last you the day just fine. Camera-wise, the 3GS is a beast, or at least it was for the time, with a 3-megapixel camera and 480p video recording capabilities. This was the first iPhone to be able to record video, and so I have to give it massive props for that, but yeah, photos and videos don't look particularly good. Although, to be fair, they don't look like absolute garbage either, especially if you have good lighting conditions. There isn't a front-facing camera, something that came on the next year's iPhone 4. To me, this isn't a big deal, but for somebody who likes taking selfies, then you're out of luck. Overall, the camera is surprisingly not awful. This right now is being filmed on the iPhone 3GS in beautiful 480p. Yeah, looks great. Love it. Beautiful. The iPhone 3GS came with a 600 megahertz processor and 256 megabytes of RAM. That's approximately 1/12 of the RAM in my iPhone 10, which really shows how far we've come. When it comes to speed, anything intensive is pretty painful, like internet load. However, the basic UI around iOS actually feels pretty simple. If you were to use this just for texting and calling, you'd actually probably be fine. Again, the iPhone 3GS runs up to iOS 6.1.6, which is pretty cool. And the best thing about it is that it runs really well. Everything is fairly fast, something we don't see a lot of phones. The iPhone 5 and 5C are probably the only other iPhones that still feel, fairly fluid on their final iOS version. And that's something that can't really be understated. The iPhone 3GS was built really well, and it always ran really well, and everything about it was just very good. However, I wouldn't say that it was great, and that's something I'll cover in an upcoming video. Link below is already posted. But anyways, I really like the iPhone 3GS even in 2018, and something out of the iPhone 3GS is downgraded to iOS 4. As far as I remember, it wasn't too hard to do. I did it a couple months ago now. Yeah, again, it was super simple. If you'd like to do it, totally go for it. It's pretty easy. Just look it up. It's there's lots of tutorials for it. If you want to play around with iOS 4, this is probably the best way to do it. iOS 4 is kind of cool. It has the old iPod app instead of the music app, so that's kind of neat. And overall, it's definitely fun to play around with, but not necessary by any means. iOS 6 runs a little bit slower on the iPhone 3GS than iOS 4 does, but honestly, it's actually not a huge difference, at least in my experience. Obviously, you shouldn't go out and buy this phone to use now. That would be ridiculous. While it's not horrifically slow, it can't do most of the modern things that we've become accustomed to, although it can still run some apps. Certain apps have old versions that'll still run on the 3GS, like YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and so on. A lot of these apps have certain issues, like with Instagram, there are no stories, the pictures are often cutting things off, and so on. But it still technically works. So if you absolutely had to, you could use the iPhone 3GS in 2018, but you definitely shouldn't. Why would you? There is just no point. But I gotta say, I'm quite surprised with how well this thing has held up over the years, and I think it joins the ranks as one of the best iPhones ever when it comes to speed and support since it was released. But that said, I think that's about it for this video. Not a whole lot to say, but essentially the iPhone 3GS is really cool and surprisingly still fairly decent. But you definitely